Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Bavaria in Germany. I know a lot of you guys have been excited for this region, and so have I, because this area is quintessentially German. Like I asked my brother-in-law, when you think of Germany, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And he goes, Lederhosen, beer, Oktoberfest. And I'm like, that's all Bavaria. That all began here in Bavaria. It's Papa and mountains and just iconic German culture is all centered here in Bavaria. Those mountains I mentioned are down here in the south. These are the Bavarian Alps, of course part of the Alps mountain chain running through Europe. You can see a bunch of lakes dotted through here, and that's because they're up high in the mountains and they're beautiful, sometimes glacial lakes. There's not a lot of glaciers left, sadly, in Bavaria, but mountain lakes, which of course means lots of rivers flowing all throughout the state. The more famous being, there's through Munich, the capital city here, there's the Isar River. We have the, I guess in English it would be Maine. I guess this is a good time to point out that I'm going to use American English pronunciations because I speak American English. I'm sure that's mine. I'm not sure. And then, of course, the iconic Danube River also flows through Bavaria. There's too many rivers to mention. Also here in Bavaria are beautiful green, lush forests. The most famous, you can see right here in German, the, let's see, Bayerischer Wald, or the Bavarian forest. It continues farther to create the Bohemian forest, but there are many forests throughout. You can see anywhere where it says Wald, like Steigerwald. Where's another one? Frankenwald. Wald means forest, so lots of beautiful forests and mountainous areas, hilly areas, rivers, farmland, and large industrial cities. Like I mentioned, Munich. There's Nuremberg, among many others. Those are definitely the two most industrialized cities, but many others are very modern, of course. Which I suppose leads us to UNESCO World Heritage Sites. If you're new to this channel, anytime there's a UNESCO site in a region I talk about, which I'm going through, planet Earth in alphabetical order, we talk about the UNESCO sites. I go to UNESCO's website and read the description. Hold on, sorry for my big arm in the way. I gotta get my tablet over here into this wide shot. There are a lot to go through, so let's dive right in. Starting with the Würzburg residence, with the court gardens and residence square. Of course, there's so many beautiful palaces and castles all throughout. We'll look at the most famous one later. This magnificent Baroque palace, one of the largest and most beautiful in Germany, and surrounded by wonderful gardens, was created under the patronage of the Prince Bishops Lothar Franz and Friedrich Karl von Schomborn. It was built and decorated in the 18th century by an international team of architects, painters including Tiepolo, sculptors and stucco workers led by Balthasar Neumann. Let's see what pictures we have here. Of course, it's a stunning, beautiful palace there. Let me see if there's any interiors. Oh, there's a couple. It's beautiful. What you don't see here is this huge staircase underneath this, and this huge, beautifully painted ceiling above. It's really nice, but honestly, I think there's prettier ones. We'll talk about it later. Next we have this interesting one, the Pilgrimage Church of Wies. Miraculously preserved in a beautiful setting of an alpine valley, The Church of Wies, the work of architect Dominicus Zimmermann, is a masterpiece of Bavarian Rococo, exuberant, colorful, and joyful. Now, what this doesn't tell you, let me see what pictures there are. Oh, it's just this. Okay. What this doesn't tell you, which is that's very beautiful, is that the story behind why it's called a pilgrimage church. It started with this statue of Jesus, which you can't see. Oh, he's too pixelated. This sculptor made this statue of Jesus being like in the process of being crucified, and it's not pretty. It's really gory, it's really graphic, and it's actually kind of ugly. Like, there's a beautiful way you can do gory and graphic, but it's very, like, it's not attractive to look at. It's not a nice statue at all. And the people hated it, and they stored it in a cellar. Looks like Christmas time in this picture. This one lady nearby thought it was neat, and she took it home and put it in her bedroom. Okay, we're not going to unpack that tonight. But she woke up in the middle of the night, and the statue was crying, real tears. And she, called everyone to come see, and there were many witnesses who testified that they indeed did see the statue crying. So they built this huge, beautiful chapel around this ugly statue. If I remember, I'll throw up a picture here of what it looks like better. It's just not a great statue, but there's a beautiful story behind it. So now it's a pilgrimage church because people come here to see the crying statue. That's a better story than this. It is beautiful. It's very Rococo. It's very Baroque. But yeah, there's a better story behind that. The town of Bamberg, which I asked on my community tab, hey Bavarians, what do I absolutely have to mention? And someone said Bamberg, and I was like, I got you, because it's a UNESCO site. From the 10th century onwards, this town became an important link with the Slav peoples, especially those of Poland and Pomerania. During its period of greatest prosperity from the 12th century onwards, the architecture of Bamberg strongly influenced northern Germany and Hungary. In the late 18th century, it was the center of the Enlightenment in southern Germany, with eminent philosophers and writers such as Hegel and Hoffmann living there. That's one part of the history section I'm skimming over because there's just too much history to go through. I'm skipping most of the Enlightenment. But you can see this quaint, just classic German architecture, classic German church there, and of course beautiful Rococo style. Actually, that's more Baroque. Rococo is like even more extravagant than that. We'll see some examples of that later. We've got the old town of Regensburg with Stadthof. Located on the Danube River in Bavaria, this medieval town contains many buildings of exceptional quality that testify to its history as a trading center and to its influence on the region from the 9th century. A notable number of historic structures span some 2 millennia and include ancient Roman, Romanesque, and Gothic buildings. Regensburg's 11th to 13th century architecture, including the market, city hall, and cathedral, still defines the character of the town, marked by tall buildings, dark and narrow lanes, and strong fortifications. The buildings include medieval patrician houses and towers, a large number of churches and monastic ensembles, as well as the 12th century old bridge. The town is also remarkable for the vestiges testifying to its rich history as one of the centers of the Holy Roman Empire that turned to Protestantism. Definitely something we're going to mention in history. So yes, another just iconic German town, but in the Gothic style. So you can see this gorgeous Gothic cathedral here. The old bridge here, very old style, old clock tower there. It's very lovely and quaint in its own way. There's a canal there. We'll talk a bit about water management in a bit, but we're going to move on to probably my favorite UNESCO site in Bavaria, which is the Markgrafel Opera House in Bayreuth. A masterpiece of Baroque theater architecture, built between 1745 and 1750, The Opera House is the only entirely preserved example of its type, where an audience of 500 can experience Baroque court opera culture and acoustics authentically, as its auditorium retains its original materials like wood and canvas. Commissioned by Margravine Wilhelmina, wife of Frederick, Margrave of Brandenburg, Bayreuth, it was designed by the renowned theater architect Giuseppe Galli Bibbiena. As a court opera house in a public space, it foreshadowed the large public theaters of the 19th century. The highly decorated theater's tiered loge structure of wood with illusionistic painted canvas represents the ephemeral ceremonial architectural tradition that was employed in pageants and celebrations for princely self-representation. Thankfully, the pictures on Google Earth are a lot better than these. But, hello, look at this masterpiece of a theater. It's stunning. Oh my gosh. The plays here must have just been you see a good play, but in a setting like this, it must be heavenly, right? I shouldn't say play, it's an opera. It's different. But yeah, there's better pictures on Google Earth of this gorgeous building. Let's talk about the water management system of Augsburg. The water management system of the city of Augsburg has evolved in successive phases from the 14th century to the present day. It includes a network of canals, water towers dating from the 15th to 17th centuries, which house pumping machinery, a water-cooled butcher's saw, a system of 3 monumental fountains and hydroelectric power stations, which continue to provide sustainable energy today. The technological innovations generated by this water management system have helped establish Augsburg as a pioneer of hydraulic engineering. Which cool. It's neat that you see the canals running underneath these buildings. That's pretty neat. And how this, you can see some, looks like water pumps there of some kind, running through empowering the industry inside these buildings. It is pretty neat, but I feel like there's so many neater things about Augsburg. Oh well. These last two overlap into other regions of Germany, France. This one goes all over the place. Actually, we're going to save this one for last because this will tie into the beginning of history. But we have mentioned this before many times, the great spa towns of Europe. We mentioned this when we talked about Baden-Württemberg and France. We saw Baden-Baden, we saw Vichy. So just to, I guess just to continue the tradition, we got to read about another spa town of Europe, don't we? This transnational serial property comprises 11 spa towns located in 7 European countries, and the one we're going to talk about now is Bad Kissingen. All of the towns developed around natural mineral water springs. They bear witness to the international European spa culture that developed from the early 18th century to the 1930s, leading to the emergence of grand international resorts that impacted urban typology around ensembles of spa buildings such as baths, Kurhaus and Kursaal, which were the buildings and rooms dedicated to therapy, pump rooms, drinking halls, colonnades, and galleries designed to harness the natural mineral water resources and to allow their practical use for bathing and drinking. Related facilities include gardens, assembly rooms, casinos, theaters, hotels, and villas, as well as spa-specific support infrastructure. These ensembles are all integrated into an overall urban context that includes a carefully managed recreational and therapeutic environment in a picturesque landscape. Together, these sites embody the significant interchange of human values and developments in medicine, science, and balneology. So we've got some pictures of Bad Kissingen in this. Sadly, there really aren't very good pictures on Google Earth. Here you can see the arcade building outside the casino, I think. We've got the bathhouse here. Yeah, there's no good pictures of the actual bathhouses that I could find. You could see a lot of the casino and the drinking hall, but I want to see the bathhouse. See, there's an assembly room here. I want to see the spa. It's like I want to see the goods. That might be it. Okay. And let's talk about the last one here that'll bring us into history, which is the prehistoric pile dwellings around the Alps. This serial property of 111 small individual sites encompasses the remains of prehistoric pile dwelling or stilt house settlements in and around the Alps, built from around 5000 to 500 BCE on the edges of lakes, rivers, or wetlands. Excavations, only conducted in some of the sites, have yielded evidence that provides insight into life in prehistoric times during the Neolithic and Bronze Age in Alpine Europe and the way communities interacted with their environment. 56 of the sites are located in Switzerland. The settlements are a unique group of exceptionally well-preserved and culturally rich archaeological sites, which constitute one of the most important sources for the study of early agrarian societies in the region. And this entry only has one picture here, which is a good example, I suppose. The thatched roof, the loggy building there, and of course the stilts. And you can see these are all remains of what used to be homes on top of these stilts. And this is in Lac de Chalon. I assume that's in France. But yes, that is all of the UNESCO sites in Bavaria. Very interesting mix, isn't it? I should have mentioned the borders because Switzerland is over here. It technically doesn't border Switzerland because of Lake Constance, as we call it in English, or Bodensee, as they say in German. But we have this long border with Austria on the Alps. We have this border with the Czech Republic as well. And then we border the state we talked about last, which was Baden-Württemberg over here. So southern Germany is going to be covered on my channel as of today. So let's get into this history. Of course, we talked about the ancient dwellings here, and people have, of course, lived here for a long, long time. The earliest cultures being Celtic cultures, but there were quite a bunch all throughout. It's one of the complications of having such a large area to talk about, that there were different cultures here, different cultures here, different cultures here, different cultures here, so on and so forth. But we can just sum it up and say Celtic for this point in history. The Romans invaded in the 1st century BCE. BCE. They established a region known as Rhaetia, at least that's how you say it in English. I've heard a bunch of different pronunciations in different languages. Rhaetia, the capital of which was Augsburg, which was established in 15 CE. That's the CE I was going for. It lasted for quite a while, but as the Roman Empire weakened and various tribal communities came down from the north and conquered the area, it would eventually be mostly abandoned by, I want to say, the 4th century. As many different tribes of, like I said, many different cultures would come through here. There would be Huns, there would be, not the Vandals, I forget, the brigands and such. Eventually, the Franks would come through in the 500s and start conquering and claiming this area. Oh, I forgot something about geography. Hold on. But eventually, Charlemagne himself would come through and control most of the region. What I forgot to mention in geography is the 3 main regions of Bavaria. And this one up here in the north is called Franconia. And that is because of this time it was part of the Franks kingdom. So pretty much this northern area here is Franconia. Down here you can see it says Schwaben. That's Swabia, or I've heard Swabia also. Which we talked a lot about in Baden-Württemberg. Most of Swabia was here, but it did bleed over a bit into this area here. The rest, kind of over here, was a region called Alt-Bayern. believe that's how you say it, but most of the sources I read divided it into Upper and Lower Bavaria. So, Upper and Lower Bavaria, Franconia, Swabia, the three regions. So, Franconia got its name from this time when the Franks took over and Charlemagne had his huge empire, which of course he famously divided between his three grandsons. And this was the third part, which would eventually become most of Germany anyway. Around this time, we start getting the first towns. Nuremberg was first mentioned in the year 1050. Munich was first mentioned in the year 1158. Munich was established by the Duke of Bavaria at the time. His name was Henry the Lion, and he seemed like a very eccentric character. He actually got banned from Bavaria for a while. But he decided he wanted to start a trade monopoly. He woke up and chose trade monopoly. And he built a bridge here over the Isar River and said, hey, if you guys want to trade up to Augsburg, you got to use my bridge. And people were like, why? There's a perfectly good bridge nearby. We'd rather use that. So he destroyed that bridge. So petty. So then they had to use his, and that's how the town of Munich began. But there were people living in the vicinity. Of course, there are people living there for hundreds of thousands of years. But the main community here were monks. And that's where we get the name München, or Munich. It means of the monks. Do you see? I like that. Eventually, Henry was deposed by the Holy Roman Empire in 1180, and the regions of Bavaria were given to the Wittelsbach family, who would rule this area for a very long time. Up here in Franconia was a bit of a different story. The rulers up here were known as the kings of Germany, and there were many different families that ruled at different times. There were the Hohenzollerns, Hohenstaufens, so on and so forth. And Nuremberg was the heart of this region, and there were often meetings held here that were called diets. They were the imperial diets, and they would vote on rules and laws and who was going to be the next king, so on and so forth. It's an important site for that. Something that would continue on into the electorate, which is a whole different story. Electorate. Anyway, that'll be merged into Bavaria later to create this region here, but I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. Next part in history, Protestantism. Germany's the birthplace of Protestantism, which was when Martin Luther said that what the Catholic Church is doing is wrong for 95 specific reasons. And people were like, you know what, you're right. And they protested the Catholic Church, hence Protestantism. And the movement spread throughout Germany. At first, it would expand to many parts of Europe. And Bavaria was a bit of a mixed bag. There were areas that were majority Protestant. There were areas that were majority Catholic, Munich being the most famous one. And there were areas that would wind up being both, which would start to lead to some conflict. So the people here did something about it very quickly. They put that down with a couple of pieces of legislation. There was the 1532 Nuremberg Religious Peace, which made violence, like religious violence, illegal, essentially. It was an issue going on over in France. You can see France poking out right there. A lot of massacres happening over there. They were called the Huguenots over there. But what really sealed the deal for religious tolerance in Bavaria was the 1555 Peace of Augsburg. That protected the rights of the minority religion. So if you're majority Catholic, it protected the rights of Protestants and vice versa. It also allowed different cities, because most of these major cities were free cities, which means they were essentially autonomous. It allowed the cities to decide if they were going to be a Catholic city or a Protestant city, instead of declaring like all places are Catholic. all places are Protestant, or just declaring a whole new church like England would do. It led to definitely peace and stability between the Christian religions here in Bavaria. If anyone was getting persecuted by religion, it was the Jewish population, which is, of course, as we all know, a very long history in Bavaria, which we're not going to get into the details of because it is not relaxing at all, and it's not YouTube friendly. So you can use your imagination at this time. But of course, it's going to get much worse later, as we all know. Let's jump to the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War was a culmination of this Protestant versus Catholic animosity among many different European powers, and Germany would become one of the main battlegrounds during this. In Bavaria in particular, this region was invaded in 1632 by Sweden. And what's funny is we just mentioned him in the Latvia episode I did last week. Gustavus Adolphus, who is one of the mad lads of history. He was a character, let's just say. If he saw the opportunity to conquer and invade and fight battles, he was literally in the front line, ready to go. He invaded most of Bavaria, sacked most of Bavaria, and claimed it for Lutheranism, which was really big in Sweden. Still is kind of big in Sweden. They're more about, anyway, that's modern Sweden. Back then it was very Lutheran, a version of Protestantism, right? The Swedes would hold this area for about 2 years or so until the Battle of Nordlingen in 1634, which was like around, it's not on my map, it's around here or so. A little tiny town. Gustavus Adolphus, of course, was ready to go. He was in the front line, ready to fight, and he was killed in that battle, which was probably what he wanted, to be honest. It was very Lieutenant Dan of him. This would lead to the downfall of the Swedish occupation. They were trapped during the winter and starved and fell ill. Many of the towns, of course, were feeling the effects of being rampaged by the Swedes. Famines, plague, so on and so forth, all of those horrible things that come with your city being destroyed by the Swedish military. Don't you hate when that happens? So they would eventually retreat and things would slowly turn back to normal. In 1806, this region became the Kingdom of Bavaria. All of these areas united into one big one and became a kingdom again under the Wittelsbach ruling family. Mainly because of another historic mad lad at this time, Napoleon. But we're not going to get into that. That's the whole story in and of itself. Just know that it happened. This was a time of cultural thriving in Bavaria. I know we talked about the Enlightenment during the UNESCO part, but this is when I feel like Bavaria becomes Bavaria. This is when we get all of those beautiful Baroque and Rococo castles, buildings, the spa, the Bad Kissingen's up there. We get beer houses, particularly here in Munich. This is when Oktoberfest would begin. It started off as a wedding party in the royal family, and now is a very big yearly tradition, which of course we're going to talk about in the Google Earth segment. We have the most eccentric king of this time, King Ludwig II, who was a little, well, they called him the Mad, but I think he was just severely depressed and probably autistic and probably homosexual, but that's speculative. He had a lot going on his plate, and his way to cope was to build beautiful fairy tale castles. So this is when we have Neuschwanstein Castle, which I will link up here my History Magazine video that I did on that castle. I thought about saving that video for when I covered Bavaria, or that article, but I really wanted to do it at the time I did. So you can watch that for more context and how much he loved Richard Wagner. And yeah, all of that period. That would all come to an end, though, in 1918 at the end of World War I, when Germany abolished royal families. And so actually the Wittelsbach has never recognized, the Wittelsbach families never recognized this, and to this day the family is still thriving, calling themselves princes and princesses. They still claim to be the royal family. It reminds me of this guy that's a descendant of the Romanovs who claims to be the Tsar of Russia today in 2024. But anyway, same energy. But the royal family was no more. And this is when Germany really started to truly become Germany, because it was a lot pre-World War I. And post-World War I was a very confusing time for multiple reasons, but in Munich in particular, because the communists took over. The communists in this area created let me get the name right in my notes. Where'd it go? The Bavarian Soviet Republic. And they held on to Munich until 1919, when the German government violently put them down and made it just part of regular old Germany again. But at this time, like in many places after political confusion, far-right movements started to spring up. And I think you know the far-right movement that I'm talking about. Yes, it's time to talk about the Nazis. So before I get into this period of German history, I am going to gloss over a lot of it. I'm going to talk about it very lightly, and that is no disrespect to anyone who suffered during this time, because there were many, many, many. I am trying to make it relaxing, and I'm trying to make it YouTube friendly, because this is my full-time job and I want to get paid. And I want to keep you relaxed as well. So we will discuss this very lightly and relaxingly, okay? That being said, in 1923 here in Munich, there was a coup attempt that failed, known as the Beer Hall Putsch. And that was when a very enthusiastic speaker would go to these beer halls and talk about his plans for how Germany would work. And of course, his name was Adolf Hitler. He tried to do a coup. He failed. He got arrested. He was sent to jail. He wrote Mein Kampf in jail at this time. But as we've seen in modern history, usually when dictators or wannabe dictators have coup attempts, people tend to rally behind him, create a movement, and become the leader of the country. As we've seen very recently in politics, Munich became known as the capital of the movement. And many cities down here in Bavaria, like Nuremberg, and a bunch of others that I'll show you on Google Earth, actually. Bamberg. But anyway, I'm not going to start pointing at the map at all of them. These towns became like iconic symbols for the nationalist movement, to be like, this is the real Germany, and this is how real Germans should look and act, and how the town should look, and so on and so forth. Which, I mean, they're not wrong, but they were using the wrong energy. Here in Bayreuth was where Richard Wagner was from, where he lived most of his life. His family puts on the Wagner Festival every year. They still do. And the Nazis really appropriated that for their own means, to be like, it was super German. He was also a racist too, Richard Wagner. But I should say he was an anti-Semite. But you get the picture. I'm going to show you some really beautiful towns on Google Earth. And the Nazi movement used those as ways of being like, look, this is how Germany should look and feel. So they took this beautiful culture and made it fit into their own definitions of fascism, to be honest. It's very sad. Here in Nuremberg, we'll see on Google Earth, they built the Nazi rally grounds, which when you see old videos of Hitler giving the speeches to the huge crowds, that's at this place in Nuremberg, which they've actually preserved and turned into a museum. We'll take a look at it later. In Munich in 1938, the Prime Minister of Britain, Neville Chamberlain, came down to talk with Hitler about maybe not having a world war, which of course failed spectacularly. Very famously, Chamberlain wound up resigning due to his actions here. He was like, you know what, you can have the Sudetenland as a treat, which was this part of Czechoslovakia over here that was very German populated, which just was the domino effect that led to the invasion of Poland and World War II. It did the opposite of what Chamberlain was trying to do. Another important thing to mention in World War II here in Munich was in the 1940s, 41, 42, there was a movement among the university students known as the White Rose, who would distribute anti-Nazi pamphlets and would have anti-Hitler meetings. They were led by Sophie Scholl, who I really think, at least in America, no one really knows who she was, and she was an incredible hero at this time. She was, of course, found and executed by the Nazis, and I think in 1942. Incredible story of her life. I'm shocked there's no Hollywood movie about her yet. There really should be. Most of these cities were very extensively bombed by the Allies during World War II, and as the Allies invaded, the Americans actually occupied pretty much the entirety of Bavaria. It was the allies of America, Britain, France, etc. And from this end was the Russians. So after the war, after the fact, after the dust settled, now it's what are we going to do with Germany? The Americans were occupying Bavaria, and therefore in 1949 it became part of West Germany, which was the democratic pro-Western part of Germany. The areas that Russia invaded became East Germany, or the pro-communist part of Germany that would last until 1989. Also important to mention at this time, between 1945 and 46, were the Nuremberg trials, which there is a Hollywood movie about called Trial at Nuremberg, which was a trial against many of the Nazis who had survived World War II to try them for crimes against humanity. Pretty sure nearly all of them, I want to say one or two, were spared, but the rest were executed there in Nuremberg. We'll take a look at the memorial for that on Google Earth as well. Bavaria and the major cities areas really sprang back. Most of the old towns that had been bombed by the Allies were rebuilt as accurately as possible. They look beautiful today, as we'll see soon. And in 1972, Munich was chosen to host the Summer Olympics, which is always something to be very proud of for a city, because that means that you've been deemed worthy to host this event of world peace and togetherness and sportsmanship, which sadly this Olympics is not known for that, because a Palestinian group known as Black September, and we're just going to state the facts here, and there's no opinions, they kidnapped many Israeli athletes and their coach, and it was a spectacularly failed attempt at hostage negotiation. Many lost their lives at this time, including the athletes and the hostages, and some policemen as well. Take of that what you will. There's a Hollywood movie about that too, called Munich. It's a Spielberg movie, so it's very heavy. Don't watch that if topics like that are very distressing for you, because it goes into graphic detail on what happened and how the whole plan to save the athletes spectacularly failed in every way possible. It's so sad. Not saying one side is right or wrong, but any human loss of life on either side is always unfortunate and sad and unnecessary and just very tragic. It's the worst disaster that the Olympics has ever had in its history, and there have been quite a few. That's by far the worst. But the good news is that Bavaria's history after this is much happier. There were a couple of dark spots here and there, also in terms of attacks but nothing that would overshadow all of the good that's happened here, all of the industry, car making, other industries that have escaped my thoughts at the moment. Full of culture, of course. Many tourists come here on Danube River cruises or to Oktoberfest to celebrate Bavarian culture, and that's just very, very wonderful. And that is the history of Bavaria. Spectacular region. So without further ado, let's go to Google Earth. I've highlighted a couple of places that I must show you, so let's go check it out. Here we are in Bavaria. Let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are. You know what I forgot when talking about geography? I always forget something. I committed the high crime of forgetting about Liechtenstein. It borders Liechtenstein too, before anyone leaves angry comments. I'm sure you already have, but I forgot Liechtenstein again. Oh, sorry. But here we are. You can see Germany right here. France, Poland, Czechia, Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. And there's Bavaria. Apparently the center of the European Union is within Bavaria, so it's as central as Europe as you can get, apparently. And you can see from above just how green it is. You can see all the beautiful mountains down here. It's lovely, isn't it? Let's start off in Munich, of course. Now, what I love about this shot of Munich, let me clear this Bavaria search. Get rid of that. What I love about this is that from above, you can see what looks like a huge crater there. Munich's in the way. What is this huge crater? It is the fairgrounds for Oktoberfest. I wonder if, can you, see it from space? What if if I tag it, you'll be able to see it. How far can we go until we can't see it anymore? It's so big. Oh, that Munich's in the way. I guess up there. It's massive. Look at that. So this is where we have to start in Bavaria at Oktoberfest. So this is what Oktoberfest looks like in Bavaria, the real Oktoberfest, with big beer halls and carnival rides and good food and stalls, and look at all the beers there being pulled by the horses, and music. You can see they're in their lederhosen. Oh wow, cooking up all kinds of yummy food and enjoying these huge fairgrounds. Look at this big beer garden here. Performers up there. Is that a statue? Is that a performer? I don't know. I believe if it was a performer. Oh wow, look at, it's a radish. I'm allergic. I can't eat radishes. But, I mean, toasty little, brat or whatever, the bread. And yeah, it is the Oktoberfest. The Oktoberfest. Oh, look at the beautiful colors of Bavaria and Munich there. So as you can see just how big this fairground is. Absolutely massive. Wonderful tradition that's been going on for hundreds of years. Let's see. Also in Munich, we have to see. Gotta make sure I can find it. I always lose it. We'll be over here because there's the residence. The Old Town. So probably the most iconic building in Munich is this church, which is very beautiful, but it is known for these big, almost like an onion dome on top. Not something that you very common see in cathedrals in Europe. See, look at, it's really pretty. These two big bell towers. And of course it's a beautiful old cathedral. We can really see it on 3D here. Look at that. Magnificent, isn't it? Nearby, I have to put it back in 2D so I can find it. We have this main square here. I guess the Marienplatz, which this is my favorite part of it, which actually has a good slideshow, is this fish fountain. with this like Magikarp on top. It's so cute. But we can see kind of the whole vibe of this area and this huge Gothic old city hall building here. The kind of regional buildings there. How beautiful, isn't it? And the column there. It's a lovely little corner of the town. And of course, you get all kinds of little tiny like street fair festivals and places to eat. And I guess that's a way to the subway, it looks like. The underground there. Yeah, it definitely looks like it. Gorgeous, right? Nearby I mentioned the residence. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? It's right here in front of me. So this was the main house for the Wittelsbach royal family, which you can, let's look at this one. See here from above, there's their garden, and it is something else. This is Rococo. If it looks like Marie Antoinette threw up all over it, it's Rococo. If it just looks nice and pretty, it's Baroque. That's how you can tell the difference. But it is something else, isn't it? It's just too lavish. But that was the style back then. It was just extreme, extreme luxury to the point of like obnoxiousness. Wow. There's another castle of theirs that was built here in Munich. Let's go find it. It is the Nymphenburg Castle or Palace, Schloss Nymphenburg. Palace. There's a difference between a castle and a palace. Do you know what it is? This is a palace. Gorgeous. See? Baroque, right? It doesn't look like Marie Antoinette threw up all over it. It's Baroque. But this sure does. What a gorgeous carriage. Wow. And of course, the huge gardens were a big part of the culture back then. In fact, I'm going to show you a beautiful garden that was built at this time of the height of the kings of Bavaria, the English garden, which is this huge long park along the river. There's the river. You can go surfing on it, apparently. And it's all green and open, but also has the beautiful forest areas, which is very characteristic of English parks, which is perfect because we just looked at a French style garden in Latvia in my last video, and this is an English one. Beautiful. I was reading that it's one of the largest parks in like Europe, which led me down a rabbit hole. What's the largest park in the world? And not national park, just like a municipal park. It's in Alaska. No surprise there. Meanwhile, we're going to talk about something else that I forgot to mention because I don't like to think about it, and that is Dachau, which was the site of the first concentration camp the Nazis opened in, I believe, 1933. I was trying to speed through that while being slow and relaxing, that whole segment, but I forgot to mention that the first concentration camp for Jewish people and just criminals was here. You can see the main building here has survived. Only these two barracks have survived. You can see where all the others were that have not survived, along with a couple other buildings there. But this building right here has the best slideshow to look at the pictures here. And I'm going to give you a warning now. If sights from the Holocaust are disturbing to you, which I totally understand, look away now. I'm going to turn off my microphone as a sign of respect, and we're going to look at this with silence and remembrance and with love and grief in our heart. So when the sound comes back, that's when you know it will be safe to look. So if you need to look away, now is the time. But for the rest of us, let's pay our respects to the victims here. All right. Let's move on to look at another relic from World War II in Nuremberg. I told you we would look at the Rally Hall, which is also easy to spot from above because it's this huge complex here with the big park and lake there. I think this is the slideshow. Yeah, where we can kind of see this like brutalist style architecture above this old building here. And the remains of what was almost like a Colosseum in Roman times, isn't it? Serving almost the same kind of purpose, huge crowds. But yes, this is now a museum. Obviously, they don't hold any kind of rallies or concerts here out of respect. That would be hugely disrespectful. So now it is just a museum, which is the right thing to do with places like that. It's either just demolish it and move on or remember what once was. Nuremberg, however, is known for, well, actually, let's talk about the trials first. Let's get that out the way. Let's finish the World War II stuff and get it over with. The courtroom here where the Nuremberg trials happened. Make sure you can see all of it there. Which, like I said, was a trial for crimes against humanity. And many people argued for their lives and lost. And this is a memorial to that event. But what Nuremberg is mostly known for is the world's largest Christmas market, which is not something that happens in the United States, which is really tragic. There was something we had in the Bay Area near Sacramento. It's still there. I just don't live there anymore. Called the Dickens Fair, which was like a Renaissance fair meets a Christmas market, where it's a big craft fair, but it's set in like the world of A Christmas Carol, and you dress up like you're from that time. And Charles Dickens is walking around, and I think Scrooge is even walking around. And it's a big market, but you pretend that you're from like Dickensian times. So not quite the same. But this is a Christmas market where you can buy all kinds of goodies. You get food, you get crafts. Oh, how neat. I really like that nativity in the log. That's pretty cool. All kinds of goodies, little trinkets. Looks like some homemade, like honey and maybe jams or something. Little cute cottages there. How cute. Little figurines. You can get anything and everything. Some wonderful bread, candles, like it looks like walnuts, meats and spices. Anything and everything in this just wonderful, jolly, festive setting. This is really something that should take off here in the United States because it would be just so big, I think. And they should sell these big cookies that you wear around your neck and give to a loved one, and then they wear it and then eat it. Although I probably wouldn't wear it, I'd probably just eat it right away. But yes, the world's largest Christmas market is here. There's a museum for the Christmas market, but I forgot where it was. It's worth looking up. You should definitely play around Google Earth in your spare time whenever you're bored, because we're only going to hop around to certain places. While we're here, we are going to go to, I forgot where to go. This place, Rothenburg ob der Tauber. which was one of the places that you guys recommended I check out. And I'm so glad because this place is gorgeous and you might actually recognize it. All of these slideshows, by the way, are wonderful, but I think this one is my favorite one. Yes, because like if this is giving you like triggering, horrifying flashbacks, this is where Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was filmed. If this is making your skin crawl because you're afraid of the child, was it the child snatcher, the child catcher? It's because Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was filmed here. But you can see all the very old architecture in this slideshow. Let me look at this one. Oh, this is the Christmas Museum. That's why I couldn't find it in Nuremberg, because it was here. Okay, put a pin in that. Let's just look at the town slideshow. So yes, iconic German. This is one of those that I mentioned that the Nazis appropriated. That they were like, they actually like bust people out to towns like this to soak up the culture. And it's really gorgeous. That's at the Christmas Museum. Let's go. Oh, not that one. We're going to look at that last. The Christmas Museum. Gorgeous. It's so quaint. Looking at these places is putting me in the holiday spirit. It's November here now. And I haven't quite been in the mood for Christmas yet, but looking at this, I think I am now. Look at the cuckoo clock. So quaint. But yes, over here is the Medieval Crime Museum, which this is also fascinating. Look at the cage there. Ooh, spiky chair. The stocks where you put your head and hands through and your feet. All kinds of devices. Oh, the Iron Maiden, right? When you're like sealed away in there. Ugh, claustrophobia. These little jail carts. Ugh, it's scratchy cloak. That would be my torture. Itchy clothes. I can't handle it. Even like if the tag in my shirt is poking my skin, I can't do it. That would be my highest torture, is the itchy cloak. Well, and then this thing, whatever that is, some kind of mask. Crazy, but neat. Like cool in a creepy way, right? What shall we see next? Next, I'm going to take you to Würzburg. Zoom in here because we got to look at that castle that we saw on UNESCO, because I want to show you that staircase because it's stunning. Look at this. Like, you don't really see grand staircases like this. Gorgeous. And then of course there's the big ceiling up there, which has some very controversial depictions up there. We won't go into it, but so what style is this? Rococo. Yes, exactly. Now you know the difference. I took so many, like I really deeply studied art history in my like freshman year of college. I took one semester in the humanities and art that I mentioned in my last video. I was obsessed and took a bunch of art history. And yeah, learned about stuff like this. It's so awesome. Here's Bamberg. And I think this is the best slideshow to kind of show you what this super quaint town looks like. Look. Just very iconic. You got your mix of Gothic, the church there. You got your mix of kind of like quaint little townhouses. Ooh, wow, that's beautiful. With the beautiful facades there. And even some much older places as well, along with the modern. We also are going to look at Bayreuth. Mainly, we're going to look at the Opera House. I promised you. Oh, amazing. Oh, how can you even pay attention to the show when you can look at this beautiful building? It's like, get to your show early So you can just look around and soak it in before the opera starts. And there's some beautiful costumes with lobsters on it. What opera is that for? And a little charming costume there. And a more modern kind of history section there, it looks like. Look at this setting here, like a castle setting. Oops. That is a beautiful backdrop. The dimensions, you know. That's gorgeous. Let's see, and this too, with the waves. Iconic in like classic opera, right? There's a little maestro there. Gorgeous, gorgeous building. But let me see. I forgot to look it up before I started this to make sure I could find it. But I think it's this. Yes, the home of Richard Wagner, who, if you don't know, wrote many classical pieces. I think probably the most famous one off the top of my head is The Ride of the Valkyries, which is the dun 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 dun. That song. He wrote a bunch. He wrote a bunch of very famous songs, which again appropriated during and during World War II. But yes, you can go there once a year for the Wagner Festival to this day. Oops, make sure we don't wind up in Switzerland. I'm going to show you, I guess the other place that someone recommended was this town called Berghausen, and that is because it has the world's longest castle. Check it out. Which you're like, that's a cool fact, but when you see it, it's on this long hill here, so it makes sense that they just built it all on top of the hill. Because if you didn't know, what's the difference between a castle and a palace? Castles is for fortification and defense. Palaces are just for everyday living. So you want to build your castle on top of a big hill so that you can properly defend. And it is just one long, beautiful structure here. Pretty neat. I love the long castle. I would love to explore this place and just wander and get lost in this gorgeous medieval architecture. Oh wow. You can see the I forget what they're called, but it's the flag of Bavaria and mainly Munich. Cannonballs. Gorgeous, right? The world's longest castle. And we're going to end this on another castle. Probably the most famous castle in Bavaria and probably the most famous castle in all of Germany. And I'm actually going to type it in. I have it here saved so that I won't forget where I am. And that is Neuschwanstein Castle. Famously, this is the inspiration for the Sleeping Beauty castle from Sleeping Beauty and in Disneyland. It is just a gorgeous, iconic fairy tale castle. Like that one line in Parks and Rec. Would a depressed person make this? Anyway, let's check out this beauty. Look at that. I would love to visit here. This is definitely on my list of things to see in Bavaria. But, like I said, we're going to end the video here for tonight. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. If you're new here and like this, I'm going to every region, state, municipality, district, what have you, that exists in the world in alphabetical order. So we are next heading over to Somalia, which my last Somalia video really blew up, and I have no idea why. You guys really seem to enjoy it. And it wasn't even, look at that, oh, I'd be puking. Oh. It wasn't even the Mogadishu episode. It was the one after that about the tip of the Horn of Africa. We're going much more inland, which is ironic because it's called Bay you guys really seem to enjoy Somalia, so be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. If you learned something new in this video or just enjoyed it, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know any cool facts you learned down in the comments, or if you want to correct my terrible German, if you want to add any facts that you feel like I should have included and didn't, or you want to elaborate more on something, as long as it's respectful, of course, throw it down in the comments. I love to read comments like that. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good night. I'm trying to figure out what's the most beautiful angle